Hi everyone, it's Stewart with Prudential Sussex Realty, here to share some tips and advice that will not only help you build a great real estate career, but should also help you protect your clients when it comes to putting together firm and binding contracts of purchase and sale. The first thing I want to talk to you about is a situation we found ourselves in on Friday when we received a call from one of our buyers stating that they weren't going to be able to get the financing that the bank had committed to. Now, while they may have had other legal options with the bank, the reality was it's Friday afternoon at 2 o'clock and we've got a closing that's supposed to take place on Monday morning. So what do? Well, in this instance, we happen to be representing both parties in a limited dual agency situation, which complicated matters a bit, but probably also facilitated a negotiated settlement between the two that was going to work for everybody because we were in a relationship with both the buyer and the seller. But we had to tread very lightly when we were sharing advice with these parties. The very first thing you need to do is recommend that the buyer seek some independent legal advice. Now, often what happens when you recommend that someone seek independent legal advice is you get some pushback. And why? Because that's going to cost them money, and nobody likes dealing with lawyers or paying their bills. So they're going to continue to press on you to provide them with the advice, but it really does put you in harm's way. So you have to continue to recommend that they seek the advice of a lawyer when they're trying to get out of a firm and binding contract of purchase and sale. Why? Because we're not lawyers. When we received our license to be able to sell real estate, we didn't get a law degree with it. And these contracts that we put people into are prepared by lawyers at the BC Real Estate Association. And it's our job to make sure that they stick. So when people need to get unstuck, they need to seek the advice of a lawyer. Remember, before you share the advice that they were having problems with the seller, you need to seek the approval of the buyer to do so. We still have to protect all the private information of both parties. We have to be Switzerland when we're working in a limited dual agency relationship. So you need to seek the approval of the buyer to go ahead and share with the seller that we're having some troubles here and that we're concerned we're not going to be able to complete on Monday. And what's the seller's options at this time? Well, the seller has the option to terminate the contract on Monday if the funds aren't in place. The contract states quite clearly under the paragraph entitled Time that if the buyer fails to show up with the completion funds, the seller can terminate the contract and claim any monies put towards the deal. That would be the deposit. One of the biggest risks is if the seller was relying on that money and went and got themselves into another contract of purchase and sale based on this contract and they were unable to complete on that one, you could find further damages being imposed on the buyer as a result. In this instance, we couldn't get a hold of the lawyers, but we did find both the buyer and the seller wanted to hold things together on the contract. Fortunately, in this case, because we were in a limited dual agency situation, the realtor was able to act as a mediator between the two parties and come to some resolution. One of the things that came up when negotiating a settlement between the two parties, acting as a limited dual agent, was the seller seeking some advice as to what was a reasonable fee to charge for this extension. If I'm going to allow the buyer a couple of weeks to get their financing in order, what's reasonable? I'm at least out the interest that I could make on the proceeds of the sale, so what's a reasonable amount? And while it's tempting to start making suggestions, you have to remember you're in a limited dual agency relationship, so you have to be hands-off. You can't provide advice to the seller as to what might be fair, because that might not be fair to your buyer, and we have to be fair to all parties. So once again, we simply had to push it back in their court, recommend that they seek their own independent advice and or just go with their gut feeling as to what the right amount was in order to be fair and reasonable and get this deal to the finish line. Let's talk a little bit about title searches and why it's so important to include them in our addendums and include them as part of the contract of purchase and sale. First off, title is one of the very few areas where a buyer stands a good chance of being able to get out of a contract if there's something on the title that they weren't made aware of and they didn't accept and acknowledge. So if you read the information sheet clearly, it says it's the seller's responsibility to disclose any charges that are on title that don't relate to those charges specifically referenced in paragraph 9, title of the contract of purchase and sale. So what does it say in paragraph 9? Well, it says quite clearly that all charges will be removed from the title at completion, except for existing charges there in favor of the Crown or any other public body that relate to the original disposition of land. So when they did the original subdivision or any further disposition, so any other further subdivisions that have got the lot to where it is today. It also says that any covenants or rights-of-way in favor of any public bodies or public utilities will remain on the title. But outside of that, unless expressly contained here in the contract, all those other charges are supposed to be removed. So what happens in the event that you've got an easement with a neighbor that allows him to cross your driveway in order to get into his, or you to get into theirs? How about a right-of-way? How about some kind of a restrictive covenant that permits someone from building too high in front of you when the original owner did the subdivision? If that isn't in favor of a public body or the Crown, there's a very good chance that it needs to be removed from title at completion. And this is why it's so critical that we use the wording from web forms that states that the buyer accepts the title, including all non-financial charges on the title search. And then we got to make sure that our buyers are given an opportunity to really read and understand all those charges. So it's important, if you don't understand them, to recommend that your clients get independent legal advice and have a lawyer read through those charges to make sure that they're comfortable with what they're signing. On Friday, I had the joy of going and watching my grade 12 daughter, Mackenzie, who's 18 now, compete in the provincial track and field championships for high schools. And she got 4th place, very exciting for us. But it was really motivating and inspirational to see these kids being able to reap the benefits of all their hard work. And it made me think that there's just no easy way to success. If you want to be successful, talent is certainly a component of that, but hard work is number one, and being dedicated and focused on where you're going to go with your career. You can appreciate with so many agents working with Prudential Sussex Realty that I get questions all the time about what's the secret sauce, what's the magic bullet, what's the thing that's going to make me successful. And I think there's a few things that people need to bear in mind regularly when they're trying to define success. Number one, what does success look like for you? It's going to look different for everybody. Is it about your lifestyle? Is it about being able to take the dog for a walk in the morning? Is it going to be about buying the big fancy house and the Lexus and the Ferrari? What is it that's going to define success for you? For me, if I was going to take a family vacation, the very last thing I would do is just head out in my car with no sense of where I was going. You need a map on how to get there. Who would leave for a vacation in Hope without having a map on how to get there, at least some sense of direction in terms of where you're going to go? You could wind up in Spokane, Washington. That's not going to be much of a vacation when you've made arrangements for yourself to be spending the weekend in Hope. So you need to find out how you're going to get there, creating a map. Tony Robbins talks about this as a massive action plan setting, and I want to share with you an idea that I had the other day when I was reading a 2-5-10 home warranty. I thought we should have a 2-5-10 life warranty. I think it's attainable to get to where you want to go by setting short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals. And I'm going to recommend something to you. I'm going to say that on Monday, when you sit down to go to work and plan out your week, that you look at a 2-day, a 5-day, and a 10-day goal. Short-term goals that are quite achievable. They might have to do with your personal situation or your business, but something you can do in 2 days, something you can do in 5 days, and something you can do in 10 days. And then let's look at some medium-term goals. I'd say a 2-month, a 5-month, and a 10-month goal. So we're setting those dates out a little further, looking at things that are achievable within that time frame. And then finally look at a 2-year, a 5-year, and a 10-year goal. Where do you want to be in 10 years? Where do you want to be in 5 years? What do you want to be earning in 2 years? I want you to write those things down on paper, and you'll find there's great power in that, in getting your goals set out on paper and then constantly referring back to them. The reality is everybody's map's going to be different. Everybody's business is going to be different. There is no secret sauce. There's no magic bullet. But I thought I'd share with you some advice, some things that I think are really important when it comes to being successful in real estate. Some of our young realtors are finding great success, and their confidence, not arrogance, their confidence, I think, has a huge part to play in why they're getting there. And how do you develop confidence? Well, you get confidence by walking the walk, by gaining experience in this industry, and that's really tough when you're getting started out in the career. So you need to do it by reading and understanding contracts, by getting yourself alongside experienced realtors, attending open houses with experienced realtors. It's one of the reasons why we have the mentoring program in place, to allow people to see just how the business is done by other people. Because when you see it done a couple of times, it does help you develop confidence. I think in real estate, attitude is everything. It's just so critical to keep a warm, smiley personality when you're trying to deal with people. And it can be a tough business. I mean, it can be a lot of work and it can be a lot of disappointment, but somehow you got to keep smiling. That's the only way you're going to get people to want to engage with you. You want to deal with someone who sincerely wants to help and serve others in buying and selling real estate. That's what develops great real estate careers. Not only do you want to be driven towards a particular goal, but you need to know that the way you're going to get there is by helping people out. And if you take care of their needs, they're going to come back for more and more and more and refer you to their friends. I'm always impressed when realtors are willing to walk away from a client I think you really do need to like and trust the people that you're working with. If you don't, step aside. There are people out there that aren't going to be a fit for you or your real estate career. Don't be afraid to say goodbye to them. I can't emphasize enough how important it is to be a stickler for the details. My mentor used to take a fine-tooth comb to a contract when it was received by a buyer before he would ever sit down to present it to a seller, and I learned a lot of respect for him through that. He would know inside and out what the terms and conditions of that contract were, so that when he sat down with the seller, he wasn't trying to do things on the fly. He really understood it. He would also take time to prepare contracts. After he had sat down with a buyer who was interested in buying a property and securing all the information he needed to know about what was important and necessary for the buyer, he would shoo them off, send them out for coffee, and spend time, probably a half an hour, preparing a contract that reflected their needs. Not just a boilerplate contract, a contract that reflected the needs of those buyers. And I think people really appreciated that. When you walk to the back office and grab a pre-printed form with all your pre-printed addendum on it, I don't think that buyers see a lot of value in that. They don't see that you're taking care of their needs. So pay attention to the details and be a pro at every turn of your day.